Good evening, everybody. Welcome to tonight's edition of Shop Talk, hosted by the Triangle Area SQL Server Users Group. As always, Shop Talk, we're glad to see you. It's the end of February almost. We're close. Unfortunately, that does mean daylight savings time, and I think there may be a Shop Talk rant about daylight savings time coming up.
On February 29th.
Well, is it? I thought it was the next week.
No, I was making a leap year joke.
Oh, I see. No, February leap years I'm fine with. Leap years perfectly acceptable. Daylight savings time, awful. However, we're probably not going to have Shop Talk on the 11th, and it won't be because of daylight savings time. I'll blame daylight savings time. Actually, I'll be in Redmond for MVP Summit, so I'll be getting into Seattle, and I won't really have time to do Shop Talk. Real DBAs only work in UTC. Yes, but Eastern Standard is the standard. Otherwise, it wouldn't have standard. So UTC just sounds French to me. Welcome, Anders. Glad to have you here. But
I didn't even need to hear you say Anders to know that was what it was.
Yes, yeah, that's Anders' job to bring me off track and thereby bring us back on track. Speaking of bringing off track, in case this is your first time here, welcome to Shop Talk. The whole idea is this is a chat-driven, technically Q&A, sometimes just goofing around. It's Monday. Work is finished. Work actually will start for me again in about an hour and a half. So this is my time to kick back and relax a little bit. We have with us Mike Christensen. How you doing, Mike?
I'm doing very well, and thanks for having me. I took on my glasses tonight because I had these new AI eyes that I just purchased.
Hopefully they work better than Gemini. But not with us tonight. Mala did come back. She's now back from her trip. However, couldn't make it tonight. And Tracy is trying to fix Google Gemini. That's a lost cause. Nonetheless, the problem with standards is that there are too many of them. Yes, and as the XKCD joke goes, and I hate it being that guy who's, here's the XKCD comic. But yeah, when you have 16 standards and somebody comes up with a standard that tries to unify all of them, suddenly you have 17 standards. And we adopt the one that's the worst of them all. I'm actually surprised USB micro didn't end up being the standard for all USB connectivity, just because it is the worst of them all. But if you do have questions, drop them in chat. We're happy to talk about them. We do have a few other topics that we are going to discuss. It's not just an extended rant about daylight savings time, thankfully, because Mike did have several topics for us. If he didn't have any, seriously, I might have just gone 25 minutes on daylight savings time and winged it the rest of the way. All right. Speaking of topics, first topic, tuning large execution plans. So tuning a query, somebody gives you a query. I'm having a slowness. Because proper English often doesn't go well with desperation for tuning queries. Usually the language skills go out the window after about 3 hours of trying to fix a bad query. So they come to you and you say, show me the query. It's really easy. It's just select star from dbo.customers, enter join dbo.orders. And you look at it, it's like, it's only 10 lines long. And you run the query and it takes 5 hours to finish. And then you start digging in. You find out, dbo.customers is a view. So let's check out the view for customers. And then you find that inside the view, there are 8 different joins. And then you find out each one of those is a whole bunch of views. And you find out nested inside of those are a whole bunch of views. And then you're just afraid to look at orders because, let's be honest, we know what's going to happen here. It's actually a view, but inside the view is just one table valued function. And inside that table valued function is an absolute monstrosity. and at some point you're not even sure how, but somehow it's opening up DOS and writing out a bunch of batch files and executing batch files in DOS, and you're like, I don't think you can even do that from a view. I don't think that's possible. But no, somebody figured out a way to do it because they needed to do that to get orders. This is how things always go. And you say, all right, I'm going to be smart about this. And I'm going to turn on include actual execution plan. And then I'm going to do Control L to give me the estimated plan, because we know it's never going to finish. It's just going to take far too long. Then you look at the view, and it's this spider web where the view is so zoomed out that you can't actually see tables anymore. It's a bunch of little black spots. And there are all these lines that are just running between them. And then the question becomes, well, how in the world do you possibly do anything about this kind of a query? And Anders has a good example. It's not bad until the view that's 4 levels down is referencing the originally called view, which, yes, that is possible. And my goodness, is it awful. Oh,
This is
actually,
freaky because you're explaining my entire weekend last weekend.
well, you know what? Let's share the screen. This is an old post, but still a good one. It's a Brent Ozar post, and this is an execution plan, part of an execution plan, and this is actually how old? It's from 2012. So give you an idea. Add XML parsing to the mix. All is good in the world. My word.
He's egging us at this point.
Yes. So actually, you know what? That reminds me of book review. I'm going to throw in book review because this is a preview of a book review that I'm going to drop on Wednesday. But I got to talk about it. Anders may or may not like the book review. We'll see. Just dealing with my PTSD. Yeah. Okay. So, you're dealing with this, and you say, how do I even deal with this? This is a little bit too much. Oh, there's a cursor in here for you, Anders. This is a little bit too much. And how, as a human, am I supposed to organize this? Well, couple of thoughts. Thought number one, this is probably a good time where you fake your own death. There are plenty of services that will help you do that. And that way you don't have to resolve the problem, because you'll just be in Mexico living off of your largesse from faking your death. There are a couple of steps involved in here, and I'm not going to tell you exactly how to do all the steps. That's for my seminar. But faking your own death to avoid having to solve this kind of a query plan actually seems reasonable to me. Now, let's say that you've got family, you've got responsibilities, you've got a mortgage, and you kind of need this job, and you can't just fake your death everywhere you go. This is why we have junior DBAs. No, we have if you say this is because we have junior DBAs, I'll give you that. Giving it to the junior to try to solve it, it's cruel. It's cruel. I wouldn't say unusual. I would say cruel and usual. But I'm going to make a recommendation. It's not going to solve your problems. However, it does help a lot. I am a cruel DBA. That makes sense. All right. SQL Sentry Plan Explorer, which is now technically SolarWinds Plan Explorer, but it's not like they've actually done anything with the product. It's still SQL Sentry's Plan Explorer. They just changed the name. But free tool, outstanding tool. This is, I think, the first step in trying to unravel the Gordian knot of a query. And
it's free?
It is free, yes. So this is this has been my go-to product for execution plan analysis for 12 years, I think, maybe longer than that. Because what it allows you to do is, let me see if they have a good image. Yeah, in the plan diagram, if I, no, zoom in won't work that well on this. I've seen Redgate people use this tool in presentations. Yeah, and yeah, I know that they're competitors, but this is seriously the best tool. What this is showing you, the red spots on the image, and like if I come over here to draw and I say, hey, I've got some red spots right
Those are
here.
your bottle points,
Yep, those
bottlenecks.
are, according to the estimated plan, these are the most painful points. They may not always be the most painful things. It may actually be, oh, hey, look, here's a table scan. And I wish I could zoom in and get a high fidelity image of this, because this table scan has several million rows that it's scanning through. And it's saying, oh, well, the estimated percentage of the cost is only 5% of the total cost. But this lazy spool is a big expensive boy, which is true because you're scanning several million rows to get like 40 rows in order to lazy spool it. This is not a great This is not a great plan. This is not going to work very well. But what Plan Explorer allows you to do is you can sort by the most expensive operators. So you can, in your operations list, let me come back up to here. Up at the top, they have all of the different operations, and you can sort by estimated cost. If you actually get the thing to run, get the query to run, you can sort by CPU utilization, by number of reads, by number of writes, estimated IO cost. So there are several really good metrics that are readily available. These are all sortable, and you could say, okay, which elements of this execution plan are the most expensive, are causing me the most pain, according to what SQL Server's query estimator says. One of the other nice things about this is I can use this and build iterative changes to my execution plan. Let's say instead of something that's absolutely miserable, instead of a horrible plan, let's suppose that I have maybe a plan like this, where it'll finish. This one says that it took about 31 seconds of CPU, 35 seconds of wall clock time, and 270,000 reads, 17,000 writes. Let's say that I've got a query like this. I can start trying to rewrite this query, look for ways to improve the query performance. And over in this history tab, there's a history tab here, flyout pane, I can see the different iterations. So if I've been working on different versions of this, I can see at a quick glance which ones have performed better, which ones are finishing in less time, and I can navigate between these versions. So that way, in the command text, I can keep changing. All right, well, how about instead of writing it this way, I'm going to switch that out to an apply operation. Well, okay, how about instead of that, I'll use a recursive common table expression. Well, okay, how about instead of that, I'm going to create a couple of temp tables, load the temp tables, and then join to those. And I may try out 3, 4, 5 different approaches to the problem, see if there's one that is remarkably better. Or even, okay, well, let's create an index and see if that changes the performance. And so I'm able to track what was the performance originally and different iterations of how it performed over time as I've made changes to this query.
Are
That's,
you
yeah.
and I'm sorry to interrupt. So are you saying that you're doing that based on estimated plan or the actual plan or both? Or
Both are
I only
possible.
say that because some of these programs, some of these queries will be like, I think in Grant Fitchie's book, he was saying like, you shouldn't really have a lot of queries running longer than 5 minutes. I mean, some of these will just hang for 2 hours, right?
Yeah.
Because it's so anyway. So you're saying S versus estimated? Like, is that your
So
suggested benchmark?
you can focus on estimated plans if you have an absolutely gnarly query. Most of the time, though, you're going to want to click this box, get actual plan, because what that's going to do is it's going to execute against your SQL Server instance, but not bring back any of the data. So anything that would
Okay.
be async network I/O, where your client is trying to get that data back, you'll get some amount of async network I/O just because it's streaming the rows, but Plan Explorer is not displaying result sets. So they're not displaying what the results look like. What it is doing is keeping track of how long it's taken and the resource utilization necessary to get to that point. And Andrew says
Awesome.
sometimes you have to start with an estimated plan for a rough optimization, then go for actual fine tuning. Yeah, that is absolutely a viable approach, especially when you are dealing with a really nasty plan, something that people are saying this just isn't finishing in time. It's taking me forever. I let it run for 10 minutes and it still failed to finish. And for that, we may have to start with an estimated plan because we just can't get an actual plan to finish. Then you can say, oh, all right, here are the first problems. Let me try to rewrite it in a way that it will finish, and then I can fine tune it. I can focus on how do I get it from slow to fast versus non-working to slow. Now, reading execution plans is its own art. Understanding what the actual problems in this are takes a lot of time and effort. I can look in here and say, all right, well, we have this X in a nested loop join, and that nested loop join is what that's saying is that there may not be a good loop candidate. The fact that we're taking 1,000 rows here and 1,000 rows here, it looks like we're effectively doing a cross join, and here's 1,000,000 rows coming out of it. So we went from 1,000 rows to 1,000,000 rows, and that's going to take a lot of time to finish up. We're doing a sort at the end, a top in sort, because it's top 500,
Ugh.
and then from select top 1,000,000 maybe. So I can look at this and say, I think I have some ideas of how I might get this to perform better. The table valued function for db log scares me because table valued functions are monstrosities. And so I could say, all right, well, can I remove this table valued function? Let's see what the function is actually doing. Why do we have what is effectively a cross join? We have a sort on here, a top in sort, because we're getting like the top, maybe this is the top 1,000 from a table. Well, if we're getting the top 1,000, why in the world do we need to get 94,000 rows? We must be ordering it by something. Do we have an appropriate index? Can we order better? Why am I getting 1,000,000 rows out of this? What are we doing cross-joining? What's the business value of cross-joining customer transactions and DB log? Now, in reality, most likely this is just so that they can get a nasty execution plan that looks cooler than just something that's real simple and easy to work with. But this is the type of thing that, hey, this query took 35 seconds. Are you really getting anything? Because you're only getting 500 rows at the end. So you go from 1,000,000 rows to 500 rows. Well, the other 999,500, they're just built for no reason. So can I create this in a way where I know what those 500 rows are going to be before we build 1,000,000 rows out? And I second Anders' comment, get Grant's book. Grant is an amazing writer. Highly recommend his work. And the new version, I think the newest version was for SQL Server 2022.
I bought it when I bought your book. I'm not trying to plug you. That's just literally when I bought it. Yeah, he has a new one and it's great. And I'm also feeling a little bit sensitive because I'm not done my Brent Orzar course.
So just dropped a link in chat here. This is his book, SQL Server 2022 Query Performance Tuning. Amazing book. I have read 3 prior editions of this. And I've
Yeah.
got this one somewhere. It's probably on the back shelf behind the curtain.
Well, I appreciate this a lot because you're exactly right. So, like, I was the one who kind of brought this up, and of course, query tuning. I like what you said. That query tuning is um, a skill that you have to build over time and learn about. But I know some, and so we are buying new hardware. So because we're moving, this is the big thing that you've heard from me before. We're moving from Oracle to SQL Server, and our hardware on SQL Server is minuscule compared to what we have on Oracle, right? So we might have like 100 terabytes on Oracle and like 20 on SQL Server. And so even preparing for tonight, I have a 70 line query with all inner joins. Um, and it's at 47 minutes and it hasn't finished.
Right.
And I'm trying to do an execution, so that was the kind of the stuff that I was running into where I don't have a lot of emergencies that I used to have in the pharmaceutical space, like where I would get emergencies every day. But I have a grant that I've been working on. So I can really only work in the new environment. And so I'm trying to learn, work with what we've got, and I'm like, what is going on in the non-production environment? This runs in 47 seconds. In the production environment, I can't even get it to come back
Right.
in an hour. So there's like, as you said, there's levels, and Grant Fitchy goes over that. He's like, there's about 15 reasons why performance tuning, and you're never going to get 100%. It could be versions, it could be your stack, it could be your chips. There could be a lot of things, but this is very helpful because it gives a lot of insight to someone who I don't have the your or Brent Ozar skills, like, but I know enough to be like, oh well, this is 87% of my query. Let me get rid of this order by real quick.
Yeah. Yeah. So, not enough RAM. That's a good call, Anders. Always add more RAM. That's always the solution. Century One Plan Explorer or SolarWinds Plan Explorer, whatever you want to call it. I think even. Well, okay.
Do they
So
sell real estate too?
what's that?
Do they sell real estate too?
No,
Century 21. It was a Century 21 truck.
I see. Oh, I see.
Not most of my jokes don't land. That's fine.
Yeah, that's okay. That's okay. We don't have you here for your humor. All right.
Different meeting.
Well, and what is actually kind of interesting is that depending on the version that you have, it still says SQL Sentry Plan Explorer. It's all right.
Mm.
Free tool, definitely recommended. Grant's book, Execution Plan book that Anders pointed out, I dropped a link in chat. That is a free ebook. You can grab the PDF for free. It's hard to have a better price than that. And Plan Explorer does also have a SQL Server Management Studio add-in where you can open up a Management Studio query, right-click on it, and then say open in Plan Explorer. That's good for a first glance. But I prefer opening up Plan Explorer, executing the query in there, and then getting the results to show because that's going to give you actual plan details. So that's going to give you actual CPU duration, reads, writes, etc., versus what opening up the execution plan in Century One Plan Explorer will give you, which is basically the execution plan and maybe a little bit of other detail. So this is really good. Also, if you have a stored procedure with several queries in the batch, so you have one stored procedure that does inserts, selects, updates, deletes, more selects, more inserts, you can see which of the queries is taking the most amount of time. I usually run a query with actual plan on SSMS, then open the plan in Plan Explorer. Yeah, you can do it. To get the full stats, I've normally run it straight from Plan Explorer, and also I don't have to worry about result sets. The display of result sets taking up time. So if it's a very large result set where there is actual time spent on displaying that on screen, Plan Explorer ignores those. Where Plan Explorer does choke is if you have examples where you've got table valued functions and you're getting the actual plan, by default, it will show you it'll take each execution of that function and write out some information. So if I have a million of those because I've got a million rows and I'm calling a function for each one of those rows, which by the way, AdventureWorks does, then it can take an excessively long amount of time to get the information to show up in Plan Explorer. That's a weird situation that is just because of the way that Plan Explorer grabs its data. But most of the time, if you're not running into that weird scenario, I've had no problems executing things from Plan Explorer. It is a great tool, highly recommended. This is, I think, the best way to sort out those types of situations where this query plan is just too crazy for me. Where do I even start? Because even if it's not perfectly right, even if, it turns out maybe this compute scalar actually isn't 29% of the total work, because compute scalars rarely are that expensive. But it could point you to, oh, okay, well, this section of the query plan, I can understand what's going on. And the coloring it is a must-have for large plans, because the coloring will quickly tell you,
It's awesome.
all right, red is high, yellow is medium, there's an orange in there as well. So I can quickly see. I can also see there's an arrow here. So I can mouse over this node and check to see what is the issue. There's an X here. I could check to see what is the issue. The issue here is that there's no actual join operation. There's no filter, which is making it a Cartesian product. That's why we have a million rows coming back. But I could also look and say, okay, I've got implicit conversions. That would be something in the select. I have an implicit conversion here. I could see other things that are possible pain points that even if it's a low percentage of the total, it could be indicative of a wider problem. This lazy spool, it's 14% of the total. But, and even the subsection in here, this is only, SQL Server only thinks it's about a quarter of the total time. But this is actually a big deal because it's leading to this explosion in data and is also a table valued function that historically gets underweighted from SQL Server. So SQL Server typically does not give the appropriate weight to a table valued function. It assumes one execution or 100 rows or some small number. And if you have 288,000 rows in here, then suddenly, as this thing executes repeatedly, that becomes a big deal. So yeah.
Can I? The weight of the lines is
Good call.
also
Yes.
indicative of something, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great call. SQL Server Management Studio, as I recall, also implements line weighting. The weight of the line, or how fat the pipe is, basically says how many rows are you pushing through. Medium-sized number of rows, smaller number of rows, lots of rows. So you can look at this again. It's a coloration thing and see, oh, I've got a very thick line here. Why do I have a million rows going through here? And that may be in itself part of your problem, where, let me see if I can find a different plan that, all right, here's a plan that's a little bit different. There is, oops, let me bring this over here. There is a table scan of this temp table in here. That is a whole bunch of lines. I know it's a whole bunch of rows.
Are you able to
scan.
mouse over it? Sorry, I don't want to be bossy.
I can't mouse over it and get any details. This is just an image.
Gotcha.
So, however, we don't need to know the exact details. I just know that these are temp tables because I can see the pound here, but I assume it's going to be tough for people to see it. Nonetheless, lots of rows because these are the thick pipes, the fat pipes here. And as a result, I can ask, hey, why are we getting all those rows from here? Is it because we need an index on that temp table? Is it because we need to figure out some way to eliminate that data, or we're writing too many rows into that temp table? What's the cause of this? It allows me to ask questions about, well, why does this thing exist? And what is it doing? And it even highlights a little bit that, oh, hey, there's a table scan in here. And that table scan, the optimizer doesn't think it's very expensive. But when you look at it and you say, I'm reading millions and millions of rows, and I'm doing it in a nested loop join. So I'm reading all of these rows so many different times. This is probably a lot of I/O. And this is probably a major cause of why we have a problem. So I can, even on a very large query, I can scroll up and down, left and right, and look for what are the things that have high percentages. Where are the fat pipes? Where are the X's and warnings and other indicators on this plan? I can look at this from a graphical perspective and see much more quickly what the core problem is. And I can also, on one of the tabs here, I can actually sort by operator performance. And I don't know that they have an example on here, but you can actually take all of the individual operators. There's a tab on here that this image may be too small to even see the tab, but there is a tab that will let you see the different elements of the plan, and you can sort those. So I can sort by expected cost. I can sort by number of rows estimated or number of actual rows. And then I can look at, click that, and it'll take me to the section in the execution plan image. And then I can see what are the elements around it. What are the plan components around it? So extremely useful product. I would happily shill for them. I'm shilling for them for free, apparently, because, however, it's also a free product. So, I'm shilling for free for a free product because that's the way we go on Shop Talk. Anyhow, that I think is probably the blasé answer that helps explain the how. How do you get there? And then, oh, you don't even have to leave contact info. That's right. Yes, you can just download this stuff. They're not going to require that you drop in your email address, and they're going to give you a call and try to upsell you on the Century One product or other stuff. Just download the thing and try out the product. So that would be where I'd go.
So this is a spoiler from if we get to it. One of the things that I like. There is a function in Azure Data Studio that is called top operations. So when you do, I don't know if it was one of your videos or if it was TriPass, but you ran through Azure Data Studio, and so they do performance plans. So it's a newer product, right? But when you go through the query plan, they have a nice summary of like the top operations. So they're kind of like, all right, here's what's going on, and here's what's costing you the most. So it sorts it, which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah. Azure Data Studio has improved its plan viewer significantly. It used to be garbage tier. It is now okay. But Plan Explorer is still the best. All right. Second thing, book review. Book review, because this is specifically, I'm only bringing it up for Anders, but I'm gonna take a quick show of a blog post in action. So, I'm the only
like
person.
Curated SQL?
No. This is personal blog. This is the one that I rarely update. But there's a book from Manning, 100 SQL Server Mistakes, How to Avoid Them, by Peter Carter. The short version is, I am going to recommend it. It is a pretty good book. The longer version is, well, By the way, Manning did give me a free copy of the book. So here, the shilling is they gave me a free copy of the book. They said, if you like it, blog about it. Also, no preconditions. They don't know what I'm going to write unless somebody's listening right now, in which case I'm still going to write it. But all opinions are my own. All rants are my own. Most rants are my own. Sometimes I take other people's rants because they're really good rants. But short version of this book is looking at the architectural level down to administration, down to performance tuning, integration services, and the like. And here are common mistakes that people run into along the way. The major mistake Peter mentions, this is number 0, and he calls it patient 0, like in a zombie movie. Have no idea who this author is. Yeah, he's British. He's written a few books before. This is his first book for Manning, but I wasn't aware.
I have to. Can I give a caveat that I buy Manning books all the time?
Yeah.
And meet books, so I don't know. Maybe I'm biased. I don't know.
You may be biased, but that's okay.
I have a lot of them.
Yeah, that's
Learn PowerShell in 10 lunches.
Yeah, no, Manning does a great job. I have
They have
dozens
good stuff.
of Manning books.
They have good stuff.
I've bought about 95% of my Manning books. I've gotten a couple of them for free, but most of the rest, I've bought them with my own money. All right, patient 0, like in a zombie movie, the first one to get the disease. And in SQL Server world, patient 0 it's just a database. How hard could it be? And that is the mistake that leads to all of the other mistakes, basically, which I think is a good way of putting it, that in a lot of cases, we just think, oh, it's just a database. It's just a data store. And that's when developers write queries that look like the one that we saw in Brent Ozar's blog post. And then they wonder, why in the world is this so slow? Maybe it's SQL Server that's slow. I'll switch it to MongoDB. That's web scale, which is its own pain points. Nonetheless, I go through quick version of the review. Chapter 3, one thing for Anders. Chapter 3 is about data types, and the author spends like 2/3 of the chapter on XML. So I think Anders will like that. I mean, it's a good review of XML. I don't know. If Solomon is in chat, Solomon has used a fair amount of XML, does some good stuff with it, but it's also not a thing that I would normally write or want to write, XPath queries in SQL, but sometimes you got to. Chapter 4, you can read about that on the blog when it comes out. Because I actually have major quibbles with Chapter 4. I've got major problems with it.
Did I just see something about jazz?
Yes, that's the name of a book from CJ Date. Database Design and Relational Theories, Normal Forms, and all that jazz.
Okay,
the actual
good.
title.
Yeah,
It's a great book. It is a really good book. That actually formed the basis of my presentation on normalization. It changed the way I thought about a lot of normalization, specifically first normal form and fifth normal form. I did not appreciate fifth normal form nearly as much before that book. After the book, I understand why fifth normal form is so important. But, read the blog post when it comes out. Performance problems. The other reason why I bring this up and include Anders on here is the author makes the argument that there are 0 reasons ever to use cursors. And that's a hill that I appreciate him being on that hill. That is not the hill I would die on. Because I'm assuming, now, he promises to handle this in Chapter 9. The problem is only 8 chapters are available in early access right now. So the way that Manning early access program... Yeah, the way that the early access program works for Manning is authors will work on their chapters. They'll release them. They'll be kind of beta version chapters. There can be additional changes. There can be additional fixes. But the intent of the MEEP is to let readers get an early view of the topic and even suggest some changes that the author could implement to make it better. So we've got 8 chapters so far. Chapter 9 is supposed to handle it. Chapter 9, as I recall, actually, let me see if I can go back to the book post. Let me grab the link to that. But chapter 9, as I recall, is administration. If I scroll down to the table of contents, yeah, instance and database maintenance. And my assumption in this chapter is that he's going to say, just use PowerShell, just use Python. You don't need cursors because you can loop up outside of SQL. Technically, but that's not always the best route. Also, I have a blog post on something that's called the leaky bucket algorithm. I did not come up with the name, did not come up with the idea. However, I don't believe you can do it in T-SQL without a cursor. I know because I spent a couple of days trying to create a version that worked without using a cursor. And it just didn't work out. The math behind it requires step by step. If you try to join everything together at once, then it doesn't sort appropriately. And a person could say, "Oh, well, write it a different way." Like, okay, then you're just writing set-based rebar. So yeah,
Row by agonizing row.
yes,
Sorry, I'm doing that for our viewers.
that's fair. That's fair. Jeff Moden would be
Rebar
pleased.
is like inside baseball.
It is. It is. And Anders also dropped in the acronym as well. Still would be rebar. Yeah. If you do it in Python or in PowerShell, yeah, you're still doing row by row. It may not be as agonizing because there's not as much cost in some languages for iterating through. Even in Oracle, PLSQL, cursors don't have the same cost penalties that they do in T-SQL. And so, all right, I understand the sentiment. I think he's wrong. I think I'd say the back and forth might make it worse. Possibly. There can be network costs, especially if you're not running that code, that PowerShell or Python code locally. But yeah, I do have it to do, finish the rest of the book. I actually have to read chapter 7 and 8. I've not finished that. The blog post, I'm going to try to get it out on Wednesday. So hopefully I'll have everything read by then. And I will rant about passive voice. I actually have a blog post coming up on passive voice. Stay tuned for that because I hate passive voice with a passion of 1,000 suns. But I do recommend the book. I would say, yeah, go grab a copy of the book.
I'll get it tonight.
It's in here. Ebook currently $33. You can save some money. And that
Good
I
deal.
find anyone that claims something should or should not always be done one way suspect. I tend to agree.
Yeah.
There are many ways to skin a cat, and to say this is the only way to skin a cat is I don't know, it's a little picayune perhaps, or it is there's
Picayune.
yeah, picayune, which it's a term.
It's based on the newspaper.
No, more like small town. Think small town, small mind, versus the Johnsonville Picayune. But yeah, that's what the term indicates. It means trivial small. Here we go. Trivial small or of little value. Or petty or small-minded. And I mean this more in that sense, but there's your word of the day, picayune. And a picayune was a small coin, apparently, with a low monetary value. There we go. All right.
Like a halfpenny.
Yeah, so I tend to agree, Anders. When there are so many ways to solve a problem, saying only one way is workable, I think is usually hard to defend. There are some times when, okay, there is one proper way to do this, and there may be other ways, but there is the proper way because of radical performance differences or because of characteristics of the language or avoiding important side effects. Something that has a fundamental reason for why it should be the one that we use. But it's very uncommon that we'd get to, oh yeah, only do it this way. This is the only way to do it. Except if someone were to say never use XML, then they would be correct. Never say never. All right. That was the book review. Book review will come out on Wednesday, hopefully. If not, it may come out on Thursday. Next up, ordering. Getting yourself in order. So Mike pointed out that in a select clause, we can have some columns. And then in an order by clause, we can have some columns. Now, this may be news to people, but you can have columns in order by clauses and in select clauses. And also, this may really be news to people. Columns in the order by clause do not have to exist in the select clause, or the where clause, or a group by, or a having. Although if they are not in the group by clause, then and you have a group by clause, then you may end up in a problem, a little bit of a pickle. But yeah, that is a characteristic of T-SQL that is not something you will find everywhere. And so, Mike, you pointed out that in older versions of Oracle, this would lead to an error.
That's right. You couldn't, if it wasn't in the select statement, you couldn't order by. And then I was trying to help somebody out. This is on Reddit, and I've been using SQL Server a lot, so I kind of made myself like a non-work database related one on my own machine, and I made it work in SQL Server, and then I made it work in Oracle, and I was like, no, you can, as of 19C, you can order by a non-selected column for sure, like no doubt. And I remember it being a big problem, but and I know people are in various versions of stuff, because I was just reading something about a guy who is in 2012, and he's all excited because he's on 2022 now, and he's like, hey, what's all the differences between 2012 and 2022? And I was like, well, I can't answer that in 2 seconds. I mean, even Kevin would take a couple hours to tell you all the differences between the versions.
It's funny you ask. It's funny you ask, because for anybody who wants to know, I'm going to drop a presentation in chat that it's called Teaching Old Dogs New Tricks. And what it covers is what has happened, what has changed in T-SQL since 2008 R2. So coming into 2012 and going through 2022. Specifically T-SQL, not additional things, not changes in Polybase, ML services, stuff like that. Not really covering column store indexes or performance changes, but really T-SQL syntax that has changed. And that talk goes over a lot of it. So yeah, you can have the columns in an order by clause that don't appear in a select clause. And in one way that we can imagine this is we may have a row number. So we have a row number operation that we call row num, and we want to order it by row num without actually displaying the row number in our end result, because that row number doesn't make any sense to an end user.
Right.
There are reasons why we'd want to do this, and that works fine. But not every variant, not every dialect of SQL will support that. So if you do switch over to MySQL or Postgres or Oracle, you may find that it could work, or maybe it won't work. Who knows? Next up, it's terminology corner. So we already did the vocabulary word of the day. Now we're going to do the pedantic word phrase section. And I was talking to Mike pre-show and said, we may not be the right people for this, because I am certainly not one for terminological exactitude. I will be rather slipshod in my speaking, especially, and in my writing. You can also do math in the order by. Absolutely. You can do a lot of stuff in the order by.
Hmm.
You can do bad
Yeah, you
things
can.
like order by 2, which will order by the second column. Please don't do that though. That's a bad idea. That I think,
Mm-mm.
Anders, that is an exception to one of to the there are multiple ways to do this and there are perfectly valid reasons why you would want to do this. I think that's a really bad thing. I can't think of a good reason why you would order by a numeric column number.
I would do it during doodling, but like now that I've read some of the books and gotten some of the feedback from you and Mala and others, like I never do it. I literally just never do it.
Yeah, no, it's terrible practice because it's very confusing to people. And if your select to order changes, then your order by statement changes, and
Right.
it's really easy to forget. So that one I think is a very bad idea. All right, terminology time. So Mike got blasted on the internet because it's the internet.
They're okay. I got downvoted a little bit. But that's okay.
I sometimes do it ad hoc if I have calculated columns. I would still we're going to name the columns. So give the column a name and include that in the order by clause. So yeah, I don't know. I can't get behind it. That would be one of my hills. Not cursors. Cursors exist. There are valid uses of cursors. Order by clause needs to have names, not numbers.
Yes.
Unless you
Yes.
name your columns numbers, in which case you are a monster.
Well, a lot of that's not allowed in a lot of yeah, that's not really allowed. You can't always start
Well, you can in
columns
T-SQL.
with a
You
number.
have to use brackets. So
Okay.
person dot
I'm not
name
gonna, let's move
as
on. I'm not
2.
commenting on this.
Well, then if you want to mess with people, you use like person dot first name as 3, person dot last name as 7, person dot email address as 4, order by 2. But then the 2 is in brackets, so people are like, "Oh, you're ordering by the last name." No, I'm ordering by the date of birth because that's the column that I called 2. This is
Nerd humor.
this is why we can't have good things. All right, terminology time. This sounds like an IRS spec for uploading 1099s. Ooh, if you've ever had to work with in the medical field 835s, 837s, those things are nasty, especially in a modern language. You can tell that the design of those things came from old languages that were fixed file length readers, and just getting one of these, opening it up, it just looks like gibberish. Not the medical,
How
but
old?
agriculture. What's that?
How old? Like Fortran, or you mean Perl? Like,
I'm thinking it was probably in the COBOL or Mumps era of. I know
yeah,
those are two different
months.
eras, but those eras. I think the 835, I want to say, is at least 40 years old as an interchange format. However, I could be wrong. All right, so that we can get this before we wrap up the show. Clauses, statements, expressions, and predicates. So Mike called something an expression, or he called it a statement, and it really wasn't a statement. It was an expression, and people got in his face about it, and it led to this. So I will be the aggressive, Mike will be the passive. That way we can be a passive aggressive duo. Mumps is still in use. Yeah, but so is COBOL. I've
Mumps is. I, hey, I get my paycheck because of Epic, so thank you very much.
I haven't been paid in 3 months, but it's still fine.
Yeah, good joke. Yeah.
All right, a clause in T-SQL. That would be a select clause, a from clause, a where clause, a group by clause. These are your major components, your major sections of a T-SQL statement. You can think generally of clauses as the major keywords. So I mentioned select or insert, delete, update. From
Having,
what's that? Absolutely.
Having. Yep.
Yep. From, group by, having, order by, those things. I forget if top is technically a clause. I don't think top is technically a clause.
Distinct is. I know distinct is.
So basically, think of these as your major sections of a query. Now, statements and expressions. Mike mentioned a case statement, and then somebody said, "Oh, no, it's a case expression."
Yeah, it's
Technically,
case
is
expression,
right.
yeah.
How? So let's talk about the difference. The difference actually makes sense, and the Redditor was correct, but the difference makes sense more in a functional programming world. In that case, then statements versus expressions means a lot. Even in imperative programming, there's some value in it. A statement is something that you execute that does not return a value. An expression, something that you execute that returns a value. So a case expression, case when blah blah blah, then blah blah blah. When blah blah blah, then blah blah blah, end. What you're getting back is a then. You can't have a case statement without a then. You can't have a case statement without something returning from that statement or from that expression. Therefore, it's not a statement, it's an expression, the case expression. A case statement is something that you can do in a language like C#, where I can say case switch 1 call function X, switch 2 or case 2 calls function Y, case 3 call function Z, and then that switch statement ends, and that is my case statement. In F#, we don't have case statements. We have case expressions because each expression element needs to return, and it all has to be the same type. So your expression result has to be the same type for each one of the cases. That's an expression. An expression is an operation that returns a value of some distinct type. A statement is an operation that does not return a value. An update statement. A select expression, technically we can call it, but I would just call it a select query. I wouldn't call that an expression, but a common table expression. That's an expression because it's returning back a value. That value is of a table, a virtual table technically. So we get back this virtual table, and we're able to do things with it. So this is where the difference lies between statements and expressions. And then a predicate is something
Thank you. I was going to ask you about predicate.
Yeah, a predicate's actually pretty simple. It's something that will return true or false. Technically can also return unknown. So you can have ternary logic with a predicate, but your where clause, each element of the where clause, and the where clause as a whole, is a true or false statement, where x is greater than 3. So we go through each row, is x greater than 3? True. This x is greater than 3. X is greater than 3? False. X is not greater than 3 for this row. And we can filter based off of whether x is greater than 3. So our predicate, our where clause, includes one or more predicates. And sometimes those predicates are trivial, where 1 equals 1. It's always equal. If it's ever not equal, then you might have a problem with your CPU.
Are you saying that you could? Wait, you're freaking me out. Are you saying that your computer could be like 1 equals 1 is not true?
I've never seen it. I couldn't imagine.
Are you saying it's theoretically possible? Like if you don't have ERAM or something?
There might be something to it.
All right, sorry, I distracted you. You freaked me out a little bit. Like,
no, it's all right.
If 1 doesn't equal 1, I'm gonna have to call a math professor or something.
Only when comparing the same floating point columns on certain CPUs. Yeah, when we talk floating point math, then we can have issues where 2 equals 2, except that, well, no, this one is 1.999999997, and this one is 2.000000002. That's usually more of the results of floating point division. No, I go back to, I had a company I worked for where they would always put if one equals one at the beginning of all their stored procedures, or like if one is not equal to one, throw an error or something. I was like, why would you do this?
Right.
Well, we've got to make sure, we've got to check. I guess if one is not equal to one, then yes, we do have problems with this machine. But like Mike asked, is that even possible? I don't know that it is. I don't want to live in a world where it is.
Yeah, I don't think for SQL, the use case that I always see is one equals one, so that you don't have to like, it's and you don't have to like
Right.
always,
Yes,
do the
that's
commas and all that crap.
correct. That's what we would do in the where clause. This was actually in statements before the select
Gotcha.
query.
Okay.
So there would be a check if one is not equal to one. And I don't know. You got bigger problems in SQL if that one fails. Yeah. At that point, if one equals one is false, then exit. It was something like that, yes. And I don't.
I've touched the surface of C just for personal development. Like I don't know what I'm doing, but floating point numbers come up every day.
Yeah.
Like the experienced guys are like, people, not guys, are like, yeah, you kind of have to understand how floating point numbers work.
Sure. So that's while one equals one, that's a different thing because you're in a loop, and then usually you have a manual break to the loop.
Right.
So that makes sense. That's just a classic loop, and you'll see that a lot in imperative development as well. But no, this was not a check of while one equals one. This was an if statement that if one did not equal to one, or if one equaled zero, or something like that. It was
Terminate,
weird,
yeah.
very weird. So clauses, statements, expressions, predicates. Clause, subsection of our SQL language, select, from, where, group by, etc. Statements, operations that do not return a value. Expressions, operations that return a value of a specific data type. Predicates, things that resolve to true, false, or unknown. And that's those four
Thank you.
elements. And with that, we're going to wrap things up for tonight because I've got about 6.5 hours of training.
He has 9 more hours of work to do.
6.5. But you know what? 6.5 is plenty enough. So with that, we missed talking about AT&T. Oh yeah, AT&T failures last week, and also some Verizon ones. And I just alighted on how terrible Google Gemini is. There's some fun stuff with it, but we're gonna have to
Shop
leave it.
Talk.
I guess.
We got plenty of time for Shop Talk next week. Next week after next,
Well,
or after.
Yeah, it'll probably
after
be
the next one.
It's probably going to be 4 weeks from now. I don't think we're going to have Shop Talk 2 weeks from now. That's MVP Summit. I'll be out there. I don't know if Tracy's going to be out there or not, but we're not going to be able to fit it in. However, tomorrow, Eugene Meidinger is talking to us about LLMs, the math behind large language models. So check that out. It's going to be 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So
He's a legend and also a trigonometry and like calculus teacher. You got to come.
That's right. So stick around for that tomorrow, 6 p.m. Eastern, meetup.com/trypass. And until we see each other in a future episode, or maybe even tomorrow night, everyone, take care.